And as we walked into this room, there's a body on a table and he's sliced open. His eyes pulls out the sockets. His tongue has been half cut out and it's on someone's plate. You can see all the insides of the organ. And I walked in and I had a panic attack and then I was screaming. I came from a very difficult background. My mother was a drug addict. My stepfather was very abusive and so was she. But it was my mum that actually first introduced me to magic. So at a very young age, she involved me in a ritual when I was about 6 or 7. We had a dog at the time that my grandmother had bought for me and it ended up getting ran over and it was basically on the edge of passing away. It had a broken spine in multiple places. The vet didn't want to operate. Said it had no chance of pulling through and my mum said, no, we want to operate, we'll pay what we need to pay. That night that the dog was supposed to go in for surgery, she gets me out of bed early hours of the morning and she says, oh, we're going to do some magic. And I was like, okay, as you do at 7, 6, you're only young. And she had a pentagram out in a beaded curtain and she had a mouse in a mop bucket. She says some words, she does this ritual, and at some point in that ritual she takes the mouse out of the mop bucket, smacks it on the head, and what that did was transfer that mouse's soul energy, its life force energy, into the dog while it was having surgery so that it would survive. And the next day we get a phone call from the vet. And the vet says, oh, your dog's miraculously recovered. We don't know how it managed to recover, not only from the surgery so quick, but from the fact that it had a broken spine so fast. And a couple of days later, we go and pick it up and the dog's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So that was my first introduction to magic. So there was no doubt in my mind that it worked. It was just a case of knowing what to do. At one point, I got to about 19 and I ended up in a very abusive relationship with my mum's dealer, and I ended up having 2 children to him quite young, and for one reason or another he ended up going to prison. And when he did, I ended up single parent, no money, no support, and I had to move back in with my mum. So I did, and at that point I was really desperate. I was very, very depressed. I felt like I had a lot of pressure on me. I didn't want to give my children the same sort of lifestyle that I'd had growing up. And in that sort of desperation, I was like, what can I do? I know I'll try a bit of magic because I've got no prospects. While I had qualifications, trying to work with 2 young children, one of them was only a few months old at the time, it was really difficult. So I thought, well, I'll try that. We know it works. And while I'd done a little bit of modelling between the ages of 16 and 18, it wasn't much. It was just very low level stuff. And one night I was doing some research and I thought, well, while I've been brought up religious, God had never come through for me. No one has ever carried my loads, no matter how desperate that I was. So I thought, well, if God doesn't answer, maybe I'll try the devil. And I did some research and I decided to do a ritual with the intention of trying to sell my soul. And it does some research, does a pentagram, cut marks on my hand to make myself bleed, did a bit of a ritual, and the day after I felt no different. It didn't seem to have worked. So a couple of weeks, if not months, passed and I thought, I'll do a bit more research. Clearly I'm not doing something right here. Does a bit more, studied Aleister Crowley and some other sort of satanic magic manuals, and I tried again. I did it a little bit differently, tried different symbols, but again it didn't work. So a few months after that I was researching and you can't find anything about black magic. You can find basic black magic stuff on the internet, but you don't find step by step, this is how you sell your soul type of stuff. So it does another pentagram and I drew it into my floor. I had wooden floorboards that had been painted white, and I get a red pen and it draws a pentagram, an inverted one this time, and as I'm drawing it I feel something take over my body and I begin to lose control of what I'm doing, and all of a sudden, while I'm still aware of what's happening, I've got no control over it, and something takes my hands and starts drawing extra symbols. In the pentagram it draws an extra circle around it, so I cut it and I'm dotting blood in the pentagram in different places, and as I do I feel this presence enter the pentagram with me, and I was absolutely panicking. It's sort of, this thing had left my body and I was back in control of myself. But then this presence was there with me. And at the time in the room that it was, so we lived in a 3-story house and we didn't have a door on the bedroom. So there was like a curtain across. And as I feel this presence step in, this pentagram with me, the curtain gets blown like really violently and this huge cold air hits me. And I froze. I was like, closed my eyes. I'm so scared, like panicked. Like you would as if there's someone watching me. And after a couple of seconds, I jumps out the pentagram, gets into me bed, I pulls the covers over me head, I'm shaking, I'm petrified. And for a couple of hours, I was just silent, but I could still feel this thing with me. And then all of a sudden, these bells start ringing, like church bells. And they were so loud that it sounded like it was practically outside the room. And it went on for hours and hours and hours. And at some point, I'd fallen asleep. But clearly, looking back on the 3 rituals that I did, I think the first 2 times, my intention wasn't right. I wasn't all for it. I wasn't desperate enough. Whereas the 3rd time, I really was. It was make or break for me, and I think that's why the whole ritual worked, why something was able to take possession. But again, I did research demonology, so learning about the different hierarchies of demons, the different names, what they can offer as well. And I chose to settle on a demon called Belphegor. He was the demon of sloth and gluttony and but either way, I can't remember exactly what paragraph I read about him, but I remember thinking that was me, that was for me. I wanted to work with him. So I did set that intention as well, that it was Belphegor that I wanted to come, which I now know. I didn't at the time when it happened, but I now know that was what took over my body, and that was what entered into the room with me on the last ritual. And when I wakes up in the morning again, I don't feel any different. So I'm like, that hasn't worked. I don't like that. This is just not working for me. I'm not going to try it again. We'll move forward. And a few weeks later, I was sent an email and offered a casting call to join an agency, a fashion modelling agency. And so I went. I ended up at a party and I'm introduced to someone who is a freelance agent, and he was all over me like a rash. He was all over every girl in there like a rash. He was quite flirtatious in that way, but he made a beeline for me and he was all like, I can get you this work, I can make you loads of money, blah blah blah. And so we stayed in touch, and at some point he gets in touch and he says to me, I've got you a really well paid job, it's abroad, it was in Brazil. And that's when things began to take a really sinister turn for me. I don't like flying, I'm absolutely scared of flying, so I take Diane just to sedate me a little bit, make me nice and calm. But at this point, for whatever reason, I hadn't had these tablets prescribed by a GP. I got them off someone. And I was very, very anxious about taking them through, security and stuff like that, having the bags checked, because I couldn't produce anything that said, yes, you can have these controlled medicine. So I said to the agent, I'm panicking, like, I've got these tablets. And he said, oh, I'll have them. Put them in my pocket. I'll take them through, don't worry. And he passes me a tablet. He didn't pop it out the thing. He's under the table. He pops one out and passes it to me in the hands. And I just take it. It looks like the diet. But I blacked out at that point. It was about 10 minutes later. I couldn't remember a thing, couldn't really remember getting on the plane. It was only when I came to, we were more or less in the hotel, walking in, getting in, so there was a few hours missing. And that should have rang alarm bells for me, but it never. And we get in this hotel room and we're all settled, and he wanted to do some content with me. And he comes in and he tells me what to wear. And I put something on and he's doing his content, and more or less when we finished, he started to say me. And I'm not quiet. No women from Liverpool are typically quiet. But, I kicked off and I was like, get off me, and what are you doing? And he was like, oh, can you blame me? You're so gorgeous. And I'm so sorry, I just can't help myself. But again, it's a culture within that industry anyway. They're all the same. They're all doing it. So I was a little bit like, all right, well, we'll just let that one lie. Hopefully you won't do it again with the way I reacted. And we goes the next day, does the shoot, and it was gorgeous. And I was really, really happy. I was like, I've made it. This is me. I'm all for this, and wow. And that night we get invited to an after party. And it was in a club, and I was talking to a couple of local girls, and I was trying to stay away from him because he was very overly flirtatious, very touchy-feely, and I didn't like it. So I'm talking to these girls, and he's talking to someone else, and he comes over and he says to me, I've got someone I'd like you to meet. And he takes me into a back room where no one else is. And there's a group of men, really old men, between the ages of 60 to about 75, and they're all dressed in suits, overly smart for where we were, totally out of place, they weren't local. And he introduces me to one of them, and he's like, hello Molly, I've heard lots about you. And I was like, oh, okay. Now bear in mind, I come from a very, very working class background. These people were super, super rich. Trying to converse with these people is quite difficult because it's knowing what to say and that sort of stuff. And we end up chatting away and what have you. And I later learned that they were the leaders of the cult. So I was introduced to them. And then from there, we went to another after party that was in like a huge, huge house. We walked into this party and, you know, there's lots of people there, but the girls have hardly got any clothes on. There's girls there in dresses like me, but lots of them are all wearing underwear and stuff like that. And we goes into this back room and there's this glass table. There's a couple of them, but one of them's bigger. And there's a lady stuck on that table, clinging on, naked, for a dear life, while we're all stood in a circle around her. And they begin to spin her on this glass table, and as she gets faster and faster, she's sliding and the glass is cutting into her arms, her ankles, her feet, her fingers, to the point where blood is flying off, hitting the whole circle of people. And at some point this real big man walks in and he just stops the table, picks her up, throws her over his shoulder. Now she's pouring with blood, and I'm like this. The agent stood next to me and I'm looking at myself with these blood drips on me, and I'm looking at everyone else, and everyone else is like, oh, this is great, having a drink. And the circle disperses and he walks out the room with her over his shoulder and takes her away. And at that point I'm a little bit like, I want to go home because this is all very weird and I don't know what's going on. I weren't well travelled at the time, so there was part of me going, is this part of the culture? So I was put off by that, and whatever reason we get in a cab on the way home. But as we're walking out of the cab, you can hear him having intercourse with this lady, but while he's having intercourse with her, you can hear every thrust, and on every thrust he's saying a word, he's chanting as he's having intercourse with her. I've never seen that woman again in the months and year after, but I did see that man again, and she was never with him. So it's, in my understanding, is she was probably either sacrificed or trafficked or in some way, shape or form. And from that point moving forward, the agent started to say really, really ominous things to me, but quite vague. Things like, are you in our club? So I made quite a big deal about that, and I said, you know, that's not right, and what he's saying, and that sounds like magic to me. And he was like, oh, don't be silly, they're together, they're in a relationship. And I'm thinking, that's not how couples are. And at some point he starts saying things, are you in this club or what? Are you in this club or what? And I was a little bit taken aback, but something inside of me went, yeah, I am. Of course I am. Because don't forget, I've got a demonic with me now. And it was from that point on that I started hearing this thing talk to me. It would scream. While I'd always been able to hear voices of what I would call my spirit guides, the angelic realms, and people's passed over loved ones, that got shut off completely. And I started to hear what I would call the hell realm, where these demons reside. So just blood-curdling screams, snorts, and smells as well. I would always smell blood, that really metallic smell, and like burning flesh. And this demon would talk to me and it would say things to me. It took a little minute for me to get used to, but I think had I not have had the gift that I had in the first place, I probably would have ended up sectioned or under mental health services at that point. But because I'd had the other, I knew how to still be able to function as a normal human being while this is going on. So we'd flown out the day after we had witnessed that. That was my first big job. Now the agent would offer me jobs here, there and everywhere, but unless they were as well paid as the first one that I did, I used to turn them down. And then I got invited to a dinner party. The jobs were coming in, I was turning them down. and I was waiting for something more highly paid, and I was offered a branded shoot, but I had to go and meet these people who own the brand at this dinner party. At this dinner party, I was then initiated into the club, basically. So we had a dinner party, and what was so very interesting about that dinner party is they made some very specific hand symbols, which is like, I think it was that, like that, which is actually a Masonic. And then he does this and everyone else does it, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. So I'm trying to copy them, you know, trying to figure it out how to do it. And he's like, oh yeah, cheers. Chin chin everybody, and that's all great. And at some point a couple of people left and he says, we're going to go in the back room, which we did. And when we went in the back room, there was it's actually called a universal hexagram. It's not a pentagram, it's a different shape. And they've got this out, and they've got the candles out, and even the way the candles were at the beginning of the ritual, he goes round and he blows a couple of the candles out, and it makes the most perfect shape of Baphomet's head on top of this hexagram. Like, it was so perfect. It was almost like he was there looking down in the shadow, which I think it was, to be fair. And so they all put on these cloaks, and the person who owns the brand, who is leading this dinner party, is leading the ritual, and he's reading from a book. It had a red cover on it. It was either leather or something similar, but I couldn't understand any of the words in it. It was Latin. And he's doing this ritual, and at some point he calls me forwards, and he takes a blade, a knife, and he slices me, basically, and I'm bleeding, and he places the blood at certain points in the pentagram, and then everyone just uncloaks and leaves. But his eyes were like, he was veiled, but you could see these eyes from behind the veil. They were just black. And everyone just clears out. He finishes this ritual, and I'm initiated into the club, and I'm dripping with, and everyone just leaves me in this room, and I'm a bit like panicky, if you like. And I just started going through the motions. I walks around and I blows the candles out, and then I retires to my room. And a couple of weeks later, I got the shoot for this brand, and it was a really, really well paid job, and it was great, and everything was fantastic. And it sort of carried on. There'd be these little dinner parties, they'd do these little rituals, but it was nothing like that girl on the table. They'd say some words, they'd do some chanting, they'd leave offerings, which were usually like blood and things like that. But it was nothing that I'd go, oh, that's, you know, really out there satanic worship. Yes, I knew it was black magic, but in my eyes at that point, they weren't sacrificing people. That girl could have just been deviant, or, you know, something like that. And even at this point, while all this stuff was going on, I'm still, part of me is like, this is because of what you did. This is the ritual. This is why you've got this demon with you that's controlling you. I'm under possession intermittently. So there are memories that I've got from those years in my life that I can't remember because that thing was in possession. Like, people can show me pictures of me, and I don't remember that I weren't there. And you can even see the demon in my eyes, because I look totally different when I'm under possession. And so at some point I get another shoot, and it was in France. This one hit, like, really, really did freak me out badly. It was great. It was all acrobatics, fire breathers. Like, it looked like a really, really normal party. And we're in one room, like a big hall, and we get taken into another one at some point in the night. And as we walked into this other room, there's all other people in there. People that I'd recognised. I wouldn't know who they were, but I'd seen them at rituals. But there was so many more of them that I didn't know. And as we walked into this room, there's a body on a table, and he's sliced open. His eye pulls out the sockets. His tongue has been half cut out, and it's on someone's plate. You can see all the insides of the organ. The lot. And I walked in, and I had a panic attack, and then I was screaming, and I was going, that's a dead body, that's a dead body. And someone comes behind me, and they were like, it's art, that's art, you need to calm down, you're ruining this for everyone, don't ruin this. You need to get a grip, you need to calm down. And he takes me into this really dark room and pours me a drink, and it's pink, this drink. I can see it through the crack in the door, you can see a little bit of colour in it. And he's like, drink the drink, Molly, drink the drink. And I'm like, I can't, I'm freaking out, I can't breathe, I'm screaming, I'm crying, and I'm like, I know what I've just seen, I know what you're doing, this is wrong, this is disgusting. and he shoves this drink and he's like, you must take this drink. And I do, and I immediately feel it had been poisoned with something. And if as this feeling come over me, and I'm sort of half in the room and half out of it, and at some point they carry me down a corridor, down some steps into what is an underground tunnel. Like, we walk through this tunnel for quite a little minute, and then we have to go right upstairs to a gate. And I fell up the stairs because I couldn't walk properly. There was a couple of people carrying me. And I fell over, and he's trying to undo the lock on the gate, gets the gate open, throws me in a cab, and I wake up in my hotel room. And I can't recall how I got back. I knew I was put in a vehicle, but I can't remember how I got in the hotel, whether someone brought me in or anything like that. I was still fully dressed in the clothes that I'd wore the night before. But when I waked up, I knew I'd been with something quite heavy, because it was still affecting me. You could see it in my face and stuff like that. And at that point, I was like, I can't carry on with this. This is getting worse and worse. This is getting deeper and deeper into these things. And so at that point, I was like, I can't go back. I'm not doing anything. And I started ignoring the invite. So they would always send me a little white envelope. Sometimes they'd be handwritten, sometimes they'd be printed like proper invitations on cards. But on every single white envelope that it was given to me in, it has a little black star on it. So at that point, I mean, they'd said during these rituals certain things to me that were very oblivious. Things like, we know what you've done in the past in your bedroom, and things like that. But I would freeze up every time they would say things like that to me and be like, don't know what you're talking about. No, don't know what you're talking about. I've never done nothing. But they knew full well I'd done that ritual to sell my soul. They said it in every way but directly. So, and they were quite capable of the magic that I could practice as well. And so at that point, I decided I'm not going to answer any invitations or anything like that. And then I stopped getting any work. I had to stop working with the agents. I remember sending him an email saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know what's gone on in that party in France, but that wasn't normal. That was a real dead body. I don't care what you say. And he was like, all right, whatever, that's fine. And I said, do I owe you any money? He said, no, you owe us something else. And I said, what? And I never got a reply. That was the last time I ever spoke to them, until I started getting stalked. So I was doing hostessing, small glamour shoots, this, that and the other, and me body started getting sick. And I remember doing a couple of different parties down south, and there was always incidents where I'd be driving back on the motorway, I'd be at a Starbucks. There was an incident that I had with a motorbike where I'd walked into him coming out of the services and spilt my drink on him. He was coming in, and I just left it. I didn't go back for another coffee. I apologised. I got back in my car. By the time I started my car back up in the car park, he'd come out with another coffee and put it on my bonnet, and I was like, oh, thank you, that's so kind of you. Didn't think nothing of it until about half an hour, 45 minutes later, when I started being drowsy at the wheel and I'd been again. This thing that's attached to me now, over the time that it had been with me, I'd drawn up quite a good relationship with it. I could speak to it if I wanted to, and it would speak to me, but now it was just pure evil, saying I was going to die. I owed it a pound of flesh. My kids were going to die. My kids were going to get killed. I was going to get killed by these people if I don't uphold my half the bargain, that type of stuff. And then I passed out when I arrived home, and my mum rang an ambulance, and I ended up in a local hospital here in Liverpool, and they were like, we can't understand what's wrong with you, and they were treating me really, really badly. So I passed out on the A&E floor anyway, after they took me off the trolley and put me on a chair. Lying on the floor, people were just stepping over me. Didn't check if I was all right. No one checked if I had a pulse. And that's what was happening. So I'm in and out of hospitals. They're trying to give me antibiotics. They're trying to give me constipation medicine. And it wasn't until I ended up discharging myself and going to a different hospital that they took some bloods from me, and my blood had gone clear. There was no redness in it at all, and they said there's no iron, you've got no white blood cells, no ferritin, there's nothing carrying your oxygen around your body. We've never seen this before. We don't know what's wrong with you. And I was really poorly at this point. I couldn't stay awake. I was just sleeping constantly, couldn't breathe very well, was on oxygen. And they started by trying to give me an iron infusion, which perked me up slightly. but not major. And then they decided to give me a blood transfusion. And when they gave me that blood transfusion, I miraculously just got better within a couple of hours. But by 24 hours passing from me finishing the blood transfusion, my blood would be clear again and I would be sick again. I wouldn't be able to open my eyes or wake up. They give me transfusion after transfusion. They were giving me iron as well, because whatever they were giving me in them blood transfusions, something in my body was zapping the iron out of it before anything else. I had to keep going in to an outpatient clinic for iron infusions. I couldn't take iron tablets because they wouldn't work. I had to have the infusion direct to the blood. And I went in one day and this nurse that I'd never seen is hooking me up to the drip. And she crouched down between my legs and she just comes so close to me and she said to me, "Molly, we can't help you here." And I said, "What? What do you mean?" And she went, "You need to find a natural healer. Doesn't matter how many times we do this, you're not going to get any better." And she walked away just as like flippant as daylight. And I was like, she knows what I've done. I'd been studying the Bible while I was in hospital anyway. It was the only book that they would actually give me while I was in there, that was just there. So and to be fair, I'd read this Bible back to front anyway. We'd done loads of Bible study when we were kids and stuff. And I'm reading this Bible and I'm calling on God and I'm saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. And, I didn't expect it to be the way it was. And the thing is, even though I'd willingly got myself into that position, I never took part in hurting anyone. The only thing I really took part in was the very, very basic ritualistic worship of Baphomet. So I'm pleading with God saying, I'm not a bad person. You knew my intention. The only reason why I sacrificed my own soul was so that I could save my children's in one way, shape or form and give them a better life. And he never, ever came through for me. He never made me any better. And obviously this demon's still screaming at me, so I know it's still there. And I ended up spending all of my savings that I've made working that job, paying spiritual practitioners and different types of healers. And I was very, very open about what I'd done. I said, I sold my soul. And I didn't say that I was a satanic, worshipper or anything like that, or I was in a cult, but, I was very, very open. I've sold my soul and I need help. And lots of people said, yes, I can help you. And I've dealt with that before. And yeah, I know what I'm doing. But even after every single appointment with these different people, I was still getting sicker and sicker, and this demon was getting louder and louder. And it was to the point, while I had a massive swollen belly, I still had it at this point, I was skin and bone. You could see every rib down my back, my spine was protruding, my chest was protruding. I was really, really poorly. It was like this thing was just draining the life out of me. Well, it was. And then I find an acupuncturist and a herbalist who was and he did some homeopathic medicine as well down in Crewe. And I remember making an appointment to see him, and I had no money left at this point, and his initial consultation was really expensive. And I remember thinking, well, this is my last shot or I'm going to die here. So I booked the appointment, I drive down to Crewe, and the whole time I'm driving down there, this demon is going crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's things trying to take control of my hands on the wheel, all kinds of stuff, voices in my head saying drive into the barrier, and it was really difficult to even get there with what was going on up here. And as I knocks on the door, it was like a home-based office. I knocks on the door and he opens it, and it's an older man, quite old, 60s, 70s, and he immediately looks to the left-hand side of me, above my head, and he says, "You've got a friend that can't come in with you." And I started laughing. I thought it was that funny. This demon had then tried to possess me to stop me going in and having any sort of treatment. So I'm laughing, like hysterically, like ha ha ha, like you'd see on a film. It was crazy. He still says it to me now, the way you laughed at me, you weren't laughing, that was your demon laughing at me. And I goes in and I said, well, I can't attach it right now, so it's gonna have to come in with me if you don't mind. And he said, okay. And he sits me down and I'm dead open, and I'm like, so I sold my soul to a demon called Belphegor. Can you help me because I'm going to die? And he just went, yes, you are going to die. But luckily enough for you, I do know someone who can help. He said, I can help you with your physical health, but I can't remove this demon, but I know someone that can. And he goes, I'll ring him. And I'm thinking, he's not going to do it over the phone. Don't be ridiculous. That's just crazy. And this Irishman answers the phone and he's like, how can I help you? And I said, oh, I've sold my soul to a demon and, you know, I've been involved in some bits and bobs, but it's killing me now because I won't uphold my side of the bargain. And he went, well, why did you do that? I said, well, I was desperate, obviously. And he says, all right. He said, as long as you're not, but what he implied was as long as I'm not an evil person, I will be able to gain it back. And what he said was, I can detach this demon from you and you will stop hearing it, but I can't get rid of your pact, or what I would call a soul contract with the demonic realm. The demon can leave, but you can't leave what you've got yourself involved in. You have to face it yourself. And I said, well, how do we do that? What am I supposed to do? And he said, you'll be shown the way if it's meant to be. And I'm thinking, yous are taking more money off me. Yous are just having me on, surely, or over the phone doing this. But he does this thing which is called toning. So they use their voice to reach certain dimensions. And he's making this really high-pitched noise on the phone, and I'm giggling past myself thinking, oh my God, this is embarrassing. He's a full-grown man singing down the phone at me, pretending he's giving me an exorcism, like, come on, grow up. And by the time he puts the phone down, this demon is silent. And I walks out and I gets in my car, and the healer had give me an acupuncture treatment. He'd done me ghost points, and he gave me some natural herbal supplements that would fortify the blood. And I get in my car and I think, I can't actually hear this demon. Is this a placebo effect, or is this is strange, really strange? And it drives home and I can't hear a thing. And I'm like, wow, this is great, fantastic. And then a couple of days after that happened, I received another invitation from the club. And at this point, they'd been emailing me. They'd stalked me. They tried to poison me, run me off the road. They were sending me pictures of me while I was out with my children. On this invitation, it wasn't a party. It was a restaurant and it was quite local to me. It wasn't in my city, but it was only just outside of my city. And it was a lunchtime appointment, meet us here at a public restaurant. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose here. I can go and tell them to stop stalking me. I can tell them they can poison me all they like. But at the end of the day, I don't have this demon anymore, so what more do they want from me? Because I can't do anything for them if I'm not in a pact with this demon. What these people do is they do terrible things in the world. These demons take power from us and give it to other people who are part of them clubs to use as they will. Do as thou wilt with it. Some people do good stuff. Certain Freemasonry groups will do good things for charity. Other ones will sacrifice traffic and do other horrific ritual, basically. And it goes and it sits down and he said, we know what your intention is here, but you do realise that you can never outrun us. So it was the 3 men from the first after party that I met at this restaurant. We know you want to run away, but you will not outrun us. We know where you live. We know everything about you. And I knew that anyway because they were sending me emails. They were hand-delivering invites to me front door. They were following me home. Pictures of me children while I was out and about within the area around me home and stuff like that. And I said, okay, I'm out. I'm not going to do anything. I won't tell anyone if you want me to sign. Because I remember saying to them, do you want me to sign a form or something like an NDA, non-disclosure agreement? I'll do whatever you want. Let me go. I won't be any trouble. And he says, all right, fine. No problem. We'll let you go. And it was so easy, like the way he says it. It was like, we'll let you go. That's fine. But we've got one last favour that we want you to do for us. And he passes me an envelope. And he says, I need you to hand deliver that to someone. Now, at that point, I was doing different little competitions, so like pageants and stuff like that. And I was due to go and do some kind of competition. Obviously, I can't name it. And they said, we know where you're going. They won't be there at the semi-final, but they will be at the final. So take that with you every time you go and someone will come and take it off you. And I said, well, who is it? And they said, you'll have to wait and see. That was that. Take it with you and someone will come and, you know, deal with it. And so I takes it and I guess through the semi-finals. I wasn't expecting to anyway, because again, I'm not typical body style, you know what I mean? I should not have got through, but I did. And it gets to the final And the day finishes and, it's all great and I'm about to leave. I've got everything packed up in my bags and I've got this envelope in my bag, my handbag. And it goes and stands outside the building. Now, it was a huge building with all different things going on, not just this thing. So I'm stood at the main entrance and there's people coming in and out, leaving, and I'm smoking a cigarette and a lady comes behind me and she says, have you got a light? So I gives her a lighter. She gives me it back and her daughter stood with her and her daughter looked about 17, 18. She was really young. And she said, you've got something else for me, haven't you? Now, I've met this here daughter while I was doing that competition and she was so innocent, so lovely, such a lovely, kind person. And she said, what you've got belongs to her, so pass it. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've got no idea what you're talking about. And I walked away because I thought the last thing I could do is help an innocent young girl be initiated into this club. That makes me as bad as them. So I didn't take the envelope out my bag and I walked away. And as I'm walking away, it was quite a far walk from where it was to the car park where my car was. And I'm walking as fast as I can, trying, I need to go home because this is all very peculiar. I'm obviously taken aback by who it was supposed to be for. And then I look behind me and there's a man walking towards me, about to cross over onto the same traffic island that I am in a grey suit. Didn't recognise him, never seen him before. And he looked me in the eye and went, give me the envelope. And I went, gets it out my bag, gives it to him. He puts it in his pocket. He turns around, he looks back the way he comes, and I carry on to my car and I drive home. That was the last ever incident with them. That was the last contact with them. They have still sent me emails here, there and everywhere. Stuff like that. I have other incidents of stalking, criminal damage, but that's only restarted since I started speaking out about what I've been into. From that point on, my health got a hell of a lot better. I ended up having a vision of Jesus. Because I'd grown up Catholic, I shunned Jesus, shunned God, didn't believe in them. But when he came to me, it was such a vivid experience. I cried, and what he did and what he said to me and the way he was with me was so real that I couldn't deny him. Jesus Christ is real and is our saviour in one way or another. And from that moment on, my faith got stronger. But it was when Jesus appeared to me, the pact, the contract was broken, and it happened in a very particular way. So I'd come home, I'd basically passed out, but I was awake. And then I was taken to what I would call hell. And there was a demon on top of me. I'm lying on the floor in a river of blood. And there's a demon on top of me and it's trying to get my soul. And then Jesus appears. And I'm stood up next to Jesus and he puts his arm around me and he was like, it's over. You've just got to walk it. You've got to face it. And as I turn around, this demon walks towards me, walks through me, and then it comes back to on the kitchen floor. And I could hear the angelic realm again. I could hear Jesus, I could hear me guides, I could hear me passed over loved ones. And the feeling, I can't explain it to you. Like, I've got goosebumps just talking about it, because that was the end of my turmoil. That was the end of everything that I've been through. And at that point, I was scared I was going to die. And then from then on, I was like, no, I'm going to live, and I'm going to live the best life that I can, and I'm going to help everyone that I can that's been in that position, whether it's struggling for money, being at rock bottom, getting out of a cult, getting away from working with demons, jinn, whatever it is. I'm going to help people, and I'm going to, do whatever good that I can for this world, because I've been given a second chance here. And from that moment on, that is when I became an exorcist. And I thought, I'm going to use my cards and I'm going to see whether, one, I have the ability, but two, I have the permission. Because at that point, I was so worried about getting involved in anything to do with magic, to do with energy, to do with the universe, because I didn't know what sort of backlash I was going to get. And I did some tarot cards and they were all really nice and smiley and like, yeah, do it. And the magician came up, and the magician is someone who has power to do. And I was like, I think I've got permission. I'm going to try. I said, I can't promise you anything. And I does a pentagram, and I did it in salt, like I'd seen in the vision. And I'm thinking I'm going to have to activate it. I knew how to activate a pentagram from growing up with my mum, from the magic that she did, Wiccan pagan magic. And I activate this pentagram and I can see the portal come up and it stands there in it. And she says I can feel something leaving my chest. And I'm saying a Latin chant at this time. Now, this Latin chant came to me like a bit of a tune. It basically said, "Demon, leave now, you are no longer welcome." So as I place my finger over her third eye, I burn a very particular set of herbs that I was shown in that initial vision. And I place my finger over the third eye and her chest starts convulsing, just like it did in the vision. And this thing peels off her and drops into the pentagram. I take it out the pentagram, I shut it down, and she says, she sat down for a minute and she was a little bit lightheaded and a little bit like woozy. And I said, "Oh God, are you okay? Like, I think I've just pulled something off you. It's the first time I've ever done it." And she said, "For the first time in 5 years, my mind is silent." And I was like, wow. A couple of months later, she went into remission and she's been a really, really happy, healthy soul ever since. And it was from that moment on that I was like, that really made a huge difference to her. But it made a huge difference to her health as well. You know, she still says to this day, like, if you hadn't done that, I think I probably would have passed away from the illness that I had at the time.